Hi, welcome back to the Busy Corner. This is lesson 10. Today I'm going to show you how to make a vertical striped scarf like the two here. Both of these were made on 3/4 inch rod, and that is going to be the thin wall cover pipe, the first size up. If you've bought a kit from me, it's actually 1 inch across, and this is the closest to the speed sticks or a 50 US size knitting needle. So anyway, both of these were made with 2 skeins for each scarf. I used, in this first example, the gray one. It is done in stockinette stitch. It is a total of 13 stitches across. It is actually 2 rows longer than the blue and green one, but the yarn is a little bit denser. It's the Hometown USA, and it's the shorter skeins. One color is Anchorage Ice, the other is Cape Cod Tweed, and it's a little denser and it doesn't stretch as much. This was made, the blue and green one was made with Hometown USA and Heartland for the other color. The green is Heartland. So in fact, this has fewer rows, but it's slightly longer, and the yarn is stretching a little bit, so you can see. But so it curves a little bit at the end since it's stockinette, and I did it as an infinity scarf. Here's another example that I worked the same way. Of course, I had to put on a lot fewer stitches. You're not going to need much yarn. 55 to 60 yards will be adequate for a long infinity scarf. So I made this one with 2 skeins of Lion Brand Thick and Cozy 100% nylon yarn, and I used a lot fewer stitches. I used 9 stitches total across, and perhaps you can see, if Joe can zoom up here, this is where I joined it. There's your seam. So your middle stitch, and this is what I'll show you on the pipes, is going to be twice the size. You'll have 4, so it's a little fatter right in the middle where they join, because you're going to cross over in the middle of the scarf. So this one was done with, as I said, 2 skeins of the Thick and Cozy that are 55-yard skeins. I used most of it. One skein was longer than the other. 9 stitches, 3/4 inch pipe, 77 rows. So I have a blooper here I'm going to use as part of our demonstration later, but because it is possible, I'll just introduce it now. It's possible to do a number of rows with this. You don't have to just do 2 vertical stripes. I actually was working with 5 different balls of yarn to make this scarf, but you can see already that there's some problems with this. One is that I have green on the edge and it doesn't show because I did it in stockinette and it rolls under. But anyway, let's get started because there's a trick to doing this. No, Lewis. And for the demonstration, I'm going to use 2 skeins of Hometown USA that are 81-yard skeins. It would be better to use, I like to use up a whole ball when I'm making a scarf if I can. So it'd be better to use something like this as that first example, the gray one. This is 64 yards El Paso Autumn. All these marled or marbled colors generally have shorter skeins, and that's more than enough for a long infinity scarf. So the first thing we have to do is put on the size pipe we're going to use. We're only going to be using 1 strand of each color, and lots of sites will show you how to, excuse me, I need to remove a cat. He never does that, but now he is. Okay, some sites will show you to pull pulling yarn from the center of the skein so it doesn't tangle up. But I've never been able to do that correctly without making a big mess most of the time. So I don't do that. I just, whatever comes away is what I use. And as I showed you before, I just put it in a big basket. You're going to need your 3/4 inch pipe. And hopefully you've all drilled some holes now for your cotter pins. I hope that's all working out. You'll have to let me know. So you've got your pipe on. If you want your scarf to be equal one color and then the other. So the scarf is divided in half, evenly. You're going to cast on 5 stitches with one color and 4 stitches with the other. So you don't need a big tail either, because you're only casting on a few stitches onto small pipe. So that is enough, more than enough, really. Cast on 5 stitches with your first color. Now, if you are doing an infinity scarf that's going to be sewn together, or if it's going to be a scarf that has a fringe, I suggest you take an additional step. I actually got this idea out of it was an arm knitting book. And I would suggest doing this when you go to cast on your next color. So you've got your 5 stitches. You need now 4 stitches of the other color, and they're going to mingle. You're going to use 2 yarns at the same time on this last stitch. But this is what I suggest doing. Again, short tail, that's all you need. Make your slip knot. Put it on your pipe. So now take your tail and bring it through this last stitch. So let me separate this so you can see a little better. So there's my last stitch. There's my tail. This is of the red yarn. Take your tail of your green yarn, bring it through this last stitch, hold it, now cast on your next stitch. You're joining those stitches together, and you will be glad you did that, because otherwise, I'll show you my blooper scarf here. So there's your, oh, I was going to do 13 stitches. Shoot. Well, that's all right. You know what? Let's just do this for the demonstration. Doesn't matter. Okay. In this scarf, this was the end that I cast off. Oops. This is the end I cast off. See how nice that looks? I'd have to weave these ends in. I was going to use it for a fringe. But this end, where I cast on, does not look very good. It's all spread out, and that's because I did not take that extra step of taking that second yarn in through that last stitch of the red. And so you have a kind of splayed out look to that bottom, which could be corrected and pulled together if you fringed it, but obviously it's too short anyway. So that's neither here nor there. But that's what I would suggest, especially if you're going to make an infinity scarf. And it looks a little funny now, but you'll never notice that. Once you've put your stitch markers in and joined it at the end, it'll look just like the ones I just showed you. And they're, again, thicker on that middle stitch, but that looks just fine. It looks better than if you were trying to sew it together by hand. So, anyway, I was going to do 13 stitches, but I forgot that. So let's just do what I've got here, because this is the critical point. So now you've got an odd number of stitches, and you will have an equal number of rows then that are the color. They'll mix right here in the middle. You wouldn't actually wear it like this because it's small. So since I want to join it, I will say that I'm going to put on my stitch markers. So it's as I showed you in a previous lesson. Separate this slightly. Go between your stitches. That's the key. So even if you have trouble defining where that little V is that you're putting your stitch marker on, the important thing is that you're going between the stitches. You'll see as we get to this merging point of the red and the green. Again, I like to alternate colors because as you weave that together, those are going to get buried in there. It helps you find where you're supposed to be. Not so critical on yarn like this, but fuzzy yarn. So don't worry about making that extra loop here. It's not really necessary. Forgot where I'm at here. Where am I at? Here, pull that a little bit. See how that looks a little weird? I almost couldn't do it. So there's your stitch marker for the last, next to the last stitch. Now here's your next stitch. So pull this around, and this is where you're going to put your marker, right here. But I want what do I want? Pink. So, that's a little tricky right at that point. I even had trouble. But I've only made a few of these. You'll get faster with practice. Should have laid these out ahead of time, huh? Okay, and then don't forget, on this last one, you will make your little alright. Now, you've put on 9 stitches. You should have 9 stitch markers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If you don't have 9 stitch markers, and again, you only need to do this if you are, well, I would still join this point here, but you only need the stitch markers if it's going to be an infinity scarf. But I wanted to show you how to mark that out. It's a little tricky, but you'll see it when you do it. Again, when you get to this last one, that's where you're going to put that right over the loop where you created with that green. So now, just go ahead. You can have your balls of yarn in the same basket. We're going to do this as stockinette stitch. This will be the first row. So if you want to use a row counter, it's helpful. It's just for your own reference later on. So start with your green yarn because that's what's in front. You're only working with 1 strand here. That's how I did these other scarves. So make your first stitches just as normal, as you would normally do. Now, you've made your 4 green stitches that you cast on. Your next stitch, you're going to use 2 yarns together, and you want to make sure you don't have your tail. You want to make sure you take your working yarn. So now, hold both of your yarns in your hand and take off your first red stitch. Put it over both strands and make the stitch with both strands of yarn. Drop the green yarn and work with the red. You're going to make these last 4 stitches now with your red yarn. And you've completed 1 row. Come back with your red yarn, just as usual. Obviously, you could make bigger pipes, more strands of yarn. It will take you about 45 minutes to make a scarf. Now you'll see as you made that last of these 4 red stitches, this green yarn comes into view. This is the stitch now that is both yarns together. This is your joining stitch, if you will. Now drop the red, pick up the green. It'll take you about 45 minutes, as I was saying, to make a scarf on 3/4 inch rods with 1 strand of this yarn. Now you're on your 3rd row. Whoa, that was a mistake. Shoot. Oops, there we go. Thought I dropped a stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, we're okay. No, we're not. Ugh. Something happened here. Oh, there we go. Shh. Alright. See what I did? I had all goofed up. Alright. That's what happens when you're not paying attention and you accidentally pull your thing off. So there's your 4. Here comes your red yarn again. Always make sure you do not have your tails. Later on, that won't be so imperative because they'll be pulled away. So now again, you have both strands because here's what's coming up. And put your stitch over, drop your green, pick up your red only. It's easy to lose track of your strand at that point, so that's what you want to be careful of. I'll do it one more time. Every time you come up to that stitch, that yarn will come into view, pop right into your hand if you're watching, and just take both. When you cast off, you are going to do the same thing. And it's hard to see, but you can see that starting to develop. That middle stitch now is where they join. And it won't be an exact pattern as you look on that middle stitch, but you'll see that's a little thicker, but not obviously so, and it's not unattractive. When you get to your cast off row, you're going to do the same thing. You need to use both those strands of yarn when you cast off, as I showed you before. Now, let's say you want to use this technique on multiple columns. Again, this is my blooper scarf, and I'm showing you this because I think you can learn as much from mistakes as you can from successes. So, again, I would say whenever you're casting on, to do as I showed you with that tail of the next yarn, bring it through. And this I cast on with 3 stitches of green, 2 of blue, 2 of a Jiffy fuzzy yarn, 2 more of blue, 2 more of green. But I made a mistake and I joined the blue twice. I joined it into the green and the Jiffy on this side, so you can see it's a bit wider. And because I did it in stockinette, the edges roll, and so you don't really see the green. It would look prettier to do it as a knit one, purl one. But this is a great way to use small amounts of yarn. I only had 21 yards of each ball, and I had 5 balls. The Jiffy was 2 strands, but that's neither here nor there. It's going to be more difficult to keep them from get tangled up. So you want to make sure that whatever yarn, I used 3 baskets next to my table, and I had the green and blue that was on the left side in one basket, the green and blue of the right in another basket, and this Jiffy in a 3rd basket. That's the one that wants to tangle because you use it on both sides of the scarf. So occasionally I would take the Jiffy and kind of unwind it, but it was not a big deal. But I still didn't have quite enough. You can see I had 21 yards of each strand, and I was only able to get about 52 rows, which isn't long enough. It really would have been long enough to make a short scarf that just comes over. I don't know if Joe can get this. Just kind of comes over like this if I used a scarf pin. But I didn't like how this bottom row turned out when I cast on. So if you don't want it to look like that, because it doesn't look the same, I don't like it. But you could this is almost a man scarf because it's short, or you could wear it like this with a clip. But that's a good way to use up scraps of yarn. And that's all for today.